be discussing is the brand new Snoop Dogg album, Missionary. So Missionary is the 20th studio album by American rapper Snoop Dogg. It was released on December 13th, 2024. It was executively produced by Dr. Dre. So, Eric, your thoughts on Snoop Dogg's brand new album?
So I actually watched an interview with this album with Snoop Dogg, and I have to say, one of my favorite. I know Snoop Dogg has changed his name over time throughout his career. My
Right?
favorite is the Dog Father. I know it's an old one, but that's still my favorite. I just thought that was perfect. Especially that album cover. It's just like it's just perfect because I love the Godfather. And anyways, um, so this album, so in the interview, he was saying how like the person's like, why did you call it Missionary? And he was like, well, it's the 30th anniversary of Doggy Style.
Yep.
So I was like, I figured I'd call it Missionary, which I respected. I was like,
It's
that's
a
kind of
theme.
a cool,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a theme.
There's definitely a theme. I think that the album cover is fucking hilarious. It is hilarious, and then it's funny because as I was listening to the album, I couldn't stop watching, like looking at this album cover. It's just so funny. And then on the Apple Music, they've had these interactive album covers now, and it's actually like the design in the circle indent of the condom. It actually rotates, which is even more funny to me. So anyways, what I thought of this album, I didn't hate it. I thought it was pretty good. Obviously you're our hip hop aficionado on this podcast. Um, but this reminded me of an album of like when Slash has like all these like famous people added to his album. Like he just makes this album for
Okay.
himself,
Yep.
and he has all these famous people come and attend and help him out.
Yep.
And I thought it was cool. It was very kind of like humbling. There were some good grooves. Now I think I listened to the 2 disc part,
Oh.
which was like, I guess the whole second disc is just instrumental. So
Okay. Okay.
I'm so does the original album have 16
16
tracks?
tracks. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's the same then. It's just that the whole second disc is all just instrumental with no lyrics.
Oh,
Which
interesting.
was kind of cool because like I could kind of have it in the background and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
some stuff.
Yep.
But I mean, like I overall I didn't hate it. Like I thought it was pretty cool. Like it was a lot of I it was like a lot of nostalgia because they had that famous that MIA song.
Oh, Paper
That
Planes.
yeah,
Or
Paper Planes,
is that
like
what it's called?
that came in one of the songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was it Out of the Blue or was it
Paper Planes.
Gorgeous?
It's yeah, Out of the Blue.
Out of the Blue.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. And then The Last Dance with Mary Jane. Um, I didn't even know. And what I liked about it was the starting didn't even sound like Mary Jane's Last Dance.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I thought that was kind of cool. I thought it was interesting because Apple uh, lists it as Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and Tom Petty and Jelly Roll. So I'm like, is it Tom Petty? Like, are you just putting Tom Petty in there because of
Writing credits.
the writing credits?
Yeah.
And then the other thing I had a question of was Sting was another part of me. Did Sting actually contribute to this song, or was it just because Message in a Bottle?
I don't think so. I think it's literally just writing credits.
Okay.
That's weird that Apple lists Sting as a
Well, because it'll say like the artist Snoop Dogg, and
yeah
then it will say like featuring,
featuring. Yeah.
right? So that's why I'm like, that doesn't fucking make sense. Because I thought for sure, I'm like, oh, that's sick. Sting does it because I know he did that. The Englishman in New York, and he did it with the Jamaican artist. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he did. And then the Jamaican guy did a whole verse about I'm a Jamaican guy in New York, and
Right.
I can't. Oh, damn, what the hell was his
I
name?
have to look it up. I have to
Yeah.
look it up.
While you're looking it up, but I thought it was something like in the lines of that. But then I was like, was he just playing bass for the song? So I think it was just because they used the song from the Police.
Yeah. Oh, I
Um,
think it's Shaggy.
Shaggy, that's it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly who it is. But then when it says like Guns and Smoke, Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent, and Eminem, which I thought was I actually really like that song. I don't know, like I find that as this podcast grows older,
Hmm.
my love for hip hop is getting more,
That's good. That's good. You
which is kind of cool, and I'm starting to understand it more, and then like I'm understanding the flow of everything.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why I actually thought I was actually excited to listen to this album. Because there's so many features. Obviously, I don't know who BJ and the Chicago Kid is, or Stallone and the Fat Money, but I know who Dr. Dre is, and I think that I don't know. I actually didn't mind listening to this album. Like I wouldn't say it's perfect, but
Nice.
it was a fun album to listen to.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Uh, Chasing Dragonflies does want to know if we watched Eminem's ad for this album. I did not.
No,
I
I
did
didn't
not.
either.
I wanted to do like a blind go into it. I didn't like look at any of the promotional material or nothing. I'll probably do it afterwards after this episode, but I didn't look at anything. I assume it was funny if it's Eminem. Um, go watch it after. Okay, we'll definitely watch it after. Um, there is a lot of good stuff on this album, in my opinion. There's a lot of I don't know if it's specifically this album or if it's just hip hop in general's problem with this album. So I'll start off with the good stuff. I think Dr. Dre's production on this album is so spot on, and I didn't know there was an instrumental second disc, which I think is perfect for an album like this because oh my god, it sounds so good. Like there some of these songs I was listening to it on like a cheaper headphone and I was listening to it, I was like, "Oh my god, if I had like a full like 7.1 surround system, this thing would sound massive." Like you can just tell there is just so much going on and the bass is just so like perfectly crafted. Like it just the whole production of this album is just like perfect Dr. Dre, like old school style. Like it's just like perfection. It just sounds so good. Even like Last Dance with Mary Jane, where it is the Tom Petty like samples, like it's just perfectly done. And then when Jelly Roll comes in, it's just like so silky smooth. I'm just like, I know Jelly Roll is a great singer, but oh my god, he is like the greatest singer that's ever existed. Like Dr. Dre just makes everything sound so good on this record. And like man, there's just like sonically like I love this album. But um there's a bit of a problem here with I think specifically Snoop Dogg as a hip hop artist these days is that and this might be a bit controversial, but he doesn't really write his own rhymes for the most part. Like there's a few songs on this album where he writes his own rhymes, but for the most part he's using not ghostwriters because he like if you look at the liner notes, they're like actually attributed to people, but he does hire people to write his own rhymes, which I don't know if that's a Snoop Dogg problem or if that is a just hip hop in general problem when it comes to mainstream popularity. Because you look at guys like Drake, right? Like he doesn't write his own rhymes. I mean, he says he does, but I don't believe him. Like it's just all ghostwriters, and a lot of the popular hip hop artists have a ghostwriter or they just hire people to write their own rhymes. Like even if you go back to like the beginnings of it, you go to like NWA, like Ice Cube wrote the rhymes for everyone in that group, right? He like wrote it for Eazy-E, he wrote the rhymes for Dr. Dre, like he was writing rhymes for everyone. So I don't know, there's a bit of a disconnect for me on this album because when I think hip hop, I'm thinking you're trying to tell a personal story for the most part. That's sort of what I'm looking for, like a different perspective or your perspective on what whatever subject matter you're trying to talk about. But when you don't write your own rhymes, it's like, I don't know. There's a bit of a disconnect for me when it comes to that. So for me, when listening to this, I'm like, okay, this all sounds like fabulous, but by the end of it, I'm like, I don't know really what the point of this album was, unless you're trying to make just a mainstream club album, which then, okay, maybe you don't really care about the lyrics all that much. So that would be the big problem I have with this album, where I just don't feel the authenticity when it comes to Snoop Dogg. Like, even because it has so many features and it has so much of Dr. Dre's production, I don't know if it's really a Snoop Dogg album, right? Like, it seems more just like a collaborative album that Dr. Dre put together. That Snoop Dogg just happens to show up, at least like some of the songs he doesn't even like rap on it, right? Like some of these songs it's just like instrumental, and then he has a guest vocalist or rapper, and Snoop Dogg doesn't really do anything on the track. So I'm like, I don't know if this is really a Snoop Dogg like output when listening to it.
I see what you're saying. It's interesting because when I listened to this, obviously I didn't know all that. But I had this sense that it was almost like this, because how old is Snoop Dogg? Like, he's got to be
60 something.
Yeah. So I looked at this as almost like, and again,
Sorry,
like, I'm not saying
53.
53. So
my bad.
I wasn't looking, like, I was looking at this album as like, I knew Snoop Dogg was up in that age era, like
Yeah.
around that age, right? So around like 55, I would say, even to 65, like.
Yeah.
And I looked at this album as like, because listening to the lyrics, it was almost like listening to your, like, when you sit down with your like grandparents and you're just like, tell me about your life.
Right.
And it was like, obviously, when we grew up, and probably when Snoop Dogg grew up and asked his grandparents of what did you like, tell me about how you grew up. It was a lot different in today's era than it is in, like, World War II era, right? Or like Cold War era. It's completely different.
Yep.
But I looked at this as Snoop Dogg just being a wise hip hop artist telling his stories.
Right.
Of like, because like some of the songs, he's talking about, like, there's these girls that there's this one time when and it was almost like listening to these like old school stories, and you're just kind of like, it has this like old, like, there's some sort of like telling tale or lesson that is learned from the stories that he's learned. So that's how I perceive this album.
Yep.
So
like, to the writer's credit, like, they did a fabulous job of trying to get that old school Snoop Dogg feel of like how he would say it. It just, like, as you listen to it and sort of like, multiple times and sort of know the history of it, of like what Snoop Dogg is as an artist, it's like, it's sort of blatant that it's written for him rather than him like actually do it himself. But also, like, some of the songs, like, he's barely on it. He's barely on the song. So like, also when I listen to it, as much as I enjoyed the album, I'm like, I don't know if like it seems like he just slapped his name on this album for the most part, and a lot of times on this album, which would be my major criticism of this. But I mean, like, the good stuff is, like I already mentioned, like, it just sounds so good. Like, it just hits in all the right spots. And I think Out of the Blue, the MIA Paper Planes sample was just so perfect. I love that song. It's just so good. That is how you do sampling to a perfection. It's just it just adds so much dimension to that song beyond just like us throwing a famous thing in there and just like, oh, it's catchy. No, it just like, it elevates it so much.
And what I liked about it was that exactly like
Yes.
what it was. It was like just a little bit like if you knew that song,
Yeah.
you would know exactly what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, even just that song, but all the others, like the sampling in this album,
Yeah.
I thought was pretty good.
No, even like Message in a Bottle when they sampled that, I was like, oh,
Mhm.
that's pretty cool. Like, did a pretty good job there. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I would say in terms of like my favorite songs is like Out of the Blue. I really like Skyscrapers. It's
Mhm.
featuring Method Man and Smitty. Method Man does like a phenomenal job on this one. Um, I'm like halfway. I don't know about the 50 Cent and Eminem one. I thought it was a cool song. I really like 50 Cent's part. Eminem's part, I was like, I feel like you could have done. That was sort of like your what is it, like B track, like your
Yeah,
throwaway lyrics. I was like, I feel like
I
you
definitely
could do better.
I definitely thought it was like typical Eminem.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I definitely got as like I said, like I've known art like Eric Clapton has done this, Carlos Santana, Slash, like they've just collaborated with other artists. And that's what I got from this. And I have to say, going back to the Last Dance with Mary Jane,
Mm.
the Jelly Roll, I'm not a fan of Jelly Roll, but this has kind of changed a little bit of my
It just
perspective
sounds
of
so
him.
good, right? Like it just
Yeah,
sounds amazing.
because before I was like, you are such a like a like I have a lot of opinions, so I'm not going to get into it because it's not about him, but it's definitely have changed my opinion of Jelly Roll for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Because and maybe it was like you said, Dr. Dre, because it seems like everything Dr. Dre touches is it just sounds good.
yeah. It just sounds amazing. Like it's
Mhm.
crazy. All right. Anyways, let's wrap this thing up. Final
Mhm.
thoughts, ratings. What are you gonna give it, Eric?
I'm gonna give this. You know what? I'm gonna go with my gut. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10.
Wow,
I
an eight out
actually
of 10.
I enjoyed it. I loved
Okay.
the fact that even though like metaphor like he could not even mention this, but like he said 30th anniversary, he's gonna call it Missionary because his first album was Doggy Style. I think it's kind of a homage to being older, right? Like older, you're not necessarily wanting to try new things. So I like that like Missionary is like the most basic move like you can do,
Right.
and I think that's like I just like I actually enjoyed listening to this, and
Mhm.
yeah, so 8 out of 10.
Nice. I'm close to where you're at. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. I think it is a fun album. I think it's worth a listen. You're not gonna go into it thinking like this is like the greatest hip hop thing ever, or like I wouldn't even say it's like top 10 hip hop album of 2024, but there are good tracks on there. Dr. Dre's production is just amazing. Um, it's a fun album, but again, like there's nothing to latch onto in terms of the artist side of it. Like you come out of it just like, oh, that was a fun album, but what story did I learn? What did I gain from listening to this album? It just for me it wasn't there. So that's sort of why I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.
Man, Grandpa liked to drink and he slept around, didn't he?
Yeah. So that's that. Anyways, so yeah, that's it for that's it for the Crossroads Music Podcasts for 2024. Very last episode of the year. We're gonna be back. I believe we're not skipping a week at all. We're just going straight into it in January. So we'll be back again Monday, I believe. Monday, 10 p.m. ET, 7 p.m. PT. We're going to do our year-end wrap-up episode on January 6th. We're just gonna go through, our top top X albums of 2024, top X songs of 2024, and then any other notable things that we want to talk about, and just wrap up 2024 on the first episode of 2025. We're here at twitch.tv/the Crossroads Music Podcast. Catch us on Spotify, Apple Music, all the places where you get your podcasts. Chasing Dragonflies, thanks for the raid. Growing Up Gaming, thanks for tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for us. Have a happy new year, everyone, and we will talk to you next year.